Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. My name is Tom Borg, and with me, I have a very special guest and friend, Mr. Alex Fisher. Alex is an entrepreneur and investor, and he's got quite a story to share with us today. So let's tune in and listen to some things that I believe can help make all of us better business people. Alex, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tom.
Alex, just curious, everybody has a story. I'm curious, how did you get started in this business of being an entrepreneur, an investor?
I grew up around a family business. My grandfather was an architect. He was born in 1901. He started studying under an elder architect when he was in his teenage years, and he drew until the age of 102. And so
Wow.
I grew up around the family architecture and the construction management business. And it was kind of through that I was exposed to computers and business and everything else that goes with that. And so I always kind of had this entrepreneurial blood in my spirit, and this desire to start a business and learn how to grow a business and figure it all out. And so I started at a pretty young age, and I started my first business in 10th grade, a small company with a friend. We had a mentor and teacher in high school that said, "You guys should go start a computer consulting business." And so we did that at 10th grade. I had just gotten my driver's license, so we would drive around to people's house here in the Detroit area and fix their computers for $15 an hour. And of course, we didn't charge for travel time or gas or any of that stuff. And we each went on each trip, even though we probably only needed one of us. So, we reduced our profits by 50%,
Right.
and learned a lot of stuff early on in that first business, and had plenty of others after that.
What was one of the lessons you learned in running that first business?
One of the most important lessons that the first one that sticks out in my mind in that business was never turn your back on your clients. If you don't have the answer or you can't figure it out, address it frankly and honestly, and communicate with them. Don't just pretend like that phone's going to stop ringing.
Oh.
And I learned that. Luckily, the stakes were low, and I was a young man, but I learned that lesson very early on, and I hold true to it to this day.
Wow, fascinating. Well, tell me a little bit more. So after high school, you had a couple of companies and really a nice company recently that you sold just a few years ago. Tell me tell me your path when you got into past high school.
Yeah, so without going into all of them too deep, let's see. I went to work part-time at Ford when I also started studying computer engineering at University of Michigan Dearborn. When I was doing that, I also teamed up with some friends from high school, and we actually got our first angel investment. We raised, I think, $30,000 by mistake. We didn't even know we were courting an angel investor, but this gentleman took a liking to our ideas and what we were doing. So we did a startup. We opened up an office in Plymouth and did stuff with the web and analytics. What's called analytics now, they didn't really talk about it back then the same way. So that failed. I graduated from college. I started a business with two of my professors and another student. That failed. And then I was working as an engineer and then a sales engineer, and I got laid off in the Great Recession. And fast forward the business you alluded to. So I was in an apartment. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife. I didn't have a mortgage, and then I didn't have a job. So it was a perfect time to, if I was ever going to do it and figure it out, that really seemed like the right time. And so I, over a couple years, I figured out a niche, which I, I'll probably talk a little bit more about later. Hired my first couple contractors and my first couple employees. Opened up an office in downtown Northville. Hired some more employees, and then about 2016, it got to the point where I sold that business to focus on other things, which I'd be happy to talk about more. But that was about 5-6 years ago. I finally had my first exit, and so I kind of got to see that life cycle from start to finish.
Wow, fascinating, fantastic. Well, let me ask you this, and I know you've learned a lot. You've got lots of experience to share. What traits do you hold most important towards being successful in business?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff probably, but some of the first things I would say, probably number one, persistence, drive, passion. You really have to have a strong desire and drive to get through things because they won't always work out. You have to pivot. You have to figure out, you know, not only do you have to figure out solutions, but you have to figure out what the problems are too sometimes. So it's certainly a strong drive and persistence. Being able to develop useful skills. When I studied computer engineering, the internet was still pretty young. There were lots of things that hadn't been invented yet. Cryptocurrency and blockchain hadn't been even thought up yet or invented yet. So there's all sorts of new things that you have to learn. You have to be able to develop the skills to learn and do those things.
Hmm.
On a couple other things, team building. You can't do everything yourself. Even if you're a one-man shop, you're going to need help, whether it's from partners or you need clients or contractors if you don't have employees, and then investors too. And so team building is really important. Then two other things that come to mind are money management, and maybe that should be the first, but basic bookkeeping and accounting. Making sure you've got clean books so you pay the IRS and don't come after you.
Hmm.
Um, Pay yourself. You can work a lifetime and not save anything, and that might be all right, but if it may run counter to your goals as well. And then managing money so that you can reinvest it back into the business, help the business grow. Businesses require money, so yeah, money management is really important to it.
Hmm.
And these aren't really in any order, but taking risk, calculated risk, is necessary if you're going to play it 100% safe, which I don't think you even can do just living in life. But it's
Hmm.
certainly, if you're going to start a business, you can't play it 100% safe. And I don't mean just throw it all to chance, but calculated risk is definitely part of the equation.
Hmm. Well, when you think about the traits that you hold as most important, could you share with us an incident that happened where that came to be true for you, where you really proved it to yourself?
I mean, just from the ones I mentioned,
Hmm.
I mean, I'm probably countless examples, I guess. Persistence. Uh, you've whether you've got employees or contractor or clients, there's always a surprise, right? And how do you react to that? You can react to it poorly sometimes. Maybe they react to it poorly, and how do you handle that?
Hmm.
Probably countless examples. If I dug them out of the dusty parts of my brain, I could find. But I mean, that'd be an example. Team building, understanding that you may have friends you hire to work with you, and the day you hire them, it changes your relationship. And that's not right or wrong, bad or good, but it does. If they're looking at you being a leader, then that's going to change the relationship. And it doesn't mean you aren't friends, but maybe you're a different type of friends. And sometimes when you're the leader or the boss, that's going to affect your friendship as well. So, um, you know, those are a couple examples, I guess.
Sure. So to have that understanding that if you do hire friends, that relationship is going to change the day you hire them.
Yeah, I
Just the
think
way it
so.
is. Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. Okay. Well, let me ask this. What are some of the biggest challenges you've experienced in running your business or businesses?
Yeah. So traction, like I mentioned a few minutes ago,
Hmm.
I had plenty of failures before success. And when I call them failures, I just mean I didn't I got to the point where it made sense to to quit or exit some capacity. So um, they weren't failures. I mean, you learn stuff along the way, and I think those experiences are part of what it can take sometimes to get to that next level. So um, traction was certainly one of the biggest challenges. Uh, Another one would be strategy, or what I call the what. You know, as a, computer nerd, someone trying to learn engineering, I remember being a young man trying to think, man, how will I ever, how will I ever be an engineer? Like I built it up as this grandiose thing in my mind. An engineer has all these skills and knows so much stuff and understands so much stuff. And I really built up, how am I going to do this? How am I going to learn to build computers or design processors or software?
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned as I got older and certainly got, into business, especially my own business, was it wasn't so much about the how. I mean, the how is important, but it's the what, figuring out what are we going to do. You can spend all day learning how to do the wrong thing, and it wasn't the right thing, and you've wasted all your time or all your money. And so understanding that strategy, the what, was a big challenge, not only because I didn't know I had to figure that out, but once I did, actually figuring it out was a whole nother experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then exiting, I mean, I realized one day I wasn't a startup anymore. I was in the growth phase. I didn't know the growth phase existed because I was so busy trying to start up.
Hmm.
And I got in the growth phase and I realized I had built another job for myself, which is fine. I had a great team and we were at the top of our game. But understanding, that what does that mean for what I'm trying to accomplish and who I am and what I enjoy working on, and thinking about, what was I working on, on nights and weekends. It wasn't what I was doing during the day. It wasn't what I had built the business for. And so understanding, you know, it was time to exit, and then figuring out how to do that was a process. So
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely an interesting challenge that I didn't go into it knowing was going to be a challenge, but it was. But
Okay,
figured it
so
out.
what you're saying that you got the business up and running, it was going well, it was growing, and then you just found out, hey, you know what? This is fun, but I don't know if I want to do this the way it's going anymore, and maybe it's time for me to exit and go do something else.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to get specific, I mean, so I was running a web design business,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to remember the statistics, but I looked at some government database once, and I think it was something like 80% of web design companies in the United States were 3 people or under.
Huh.
And then it was, I think, 95% of web design companies were 10 people or under. And
Mm-hmm.
I had grown it at its high point to 12 people. And so we were, for a web design company, one of the largest web design companies
Hmm.
in the state, in the country. And so yeah, I mean, it was a cool experience, but I found, I was learning about things like Bitcoin and blockchain, and then Ethereum, and there's a lot of buzz about that stuff, a lot of hype, but from a technology perspective, there's some really interesting things that really appealed to me, and spoke not only the engineer in me, but the finance nerd, the political science, inner political science student, all sorts of stuff that appealed to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I was getting very passionate about that. And so understanding it was time to focus on other stuff was something I decided was, important to make a priority for.
Okay. Now I have a number of clients and I've talked to a number of business owners. They are curious because they get to that point or they're getting to that point. How do you go about exiting from your business? What was the path you took to do that? How did you do that?
Yeah, so kind of early on in the business, I had a random person add me and message me on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like they were a larger company. They had a project. They were looking for a partner they could work on it, a group of developers. They they were interested in us, getting together to talk about how we might be able to help them. So I flew out and met with them, and then I left that trip with an basically a letter of intent saying they were interested in buying the business from me. And I never expected that. I mean, I was just still getting traction, figuring out what I was doing, and the last thing I expected was someone would want to buy my little business. And so that deal ended up not going through. I walked away from it, but it got me thinking that, maybe I could sell my business one day. I hadn't thought about it, and so it introduced me to that idea, and
Mm-hmm.
I learned. I read a little bit about it, and I realized that you can take steps over a number of years to get your business in a very good sellable condition. Things like having a leadership team, having recurring revenue, having good books,
Mm-hmm.
having good testimonials from good client history stuff, a number of things like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I did some more research, and I learned that there are business brokers that will market and help you sell your business. And so I did did some research on a website and hired a business broker. They didn't charge anything up front. It was
Mm-hmm.
commission based only, and they
Mm-hmm.
they were able to help me find a number of qualified leads.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, within a couple months, we closed the deal, and there was a transition period there where I worked with the buyer for a year. And at the end of the day, I hit all my earnout targets. Everyone got pay raises, no one got let go. The company that bought us did better, and their clients were happier. So it was win-win-win all around.
Great. Great story. Great experience. Great lesson for all of us. All right. So I know I've always admired the way you were always able to know where the next great idea was going to become a potential business or an opportunity. So how do you decide where to focus on particular markets or services as you look to the future?
Yeah. So um, I was born in 1981, so I'm the elder millennial, right? You can't get any millennial any older than me, right? So I was
Ah,
born in this weird period of
uh-huh.
transition from, I remember rotary dial phones and before email, and it was, we were the space shuttle launched for the first time in 1981, right? So it was the dawn of the new space age, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of, part of it's the timing of I just kind of got focused on the bleeding edge of things, learning about computers and nerding out on that. And so part of it was timing, but I had this teacher, Russ Gibb, at Dearborn High, that was my high school video teacher and also a great mentor to me. He was the one that told me to start up my first business. But he always had a saying that, if everyone's going one direction, go the other direction, right? So if everyone's whatever, selling vacuum cleaners, don't go, starting a business, sell vacuum cleaners, right? Or if everyone's making mobile apps, don't go making another mobile app
Mm-hmm.
company. And so it's not like a hard and fast rule, but I think, if there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of people, you know, it could be sometimes I call it like a crowded trade, but if everyone's looking at this thing, like go look at where people aren't focusing their attention. Find those interesting opportunities there where you can, really make an impact, maybe quicker with less competition.
Mm-hmm. So so in your case, what were some of the things you looked at and developed?
Yeah, so in the previous business, commercial progression, that I had started when I got laid off and then eventually exited, after about my first year of figuring out what I was going to do with that and how I, was going to help people and make money and, pay
Mm-hmm.
myself, I found I found my way to a piece of software called Drupal. Drupal was a tool for creating and managing websites, and I'm not really close to that community anymore today, but back when I found it, there were other tools like Joomla and WordPress, and those, I think all three of those products live on today
Mm-hmm.
to some degree. But
Mm-hmm.
because of my background in computer engineering and the way that Drupal was architected, it was really powerful, but it made it maybe sometimes difficult for non-technical people to use it the right way. So I found an interesting opportunity and skill that I could develop that kind of meshed with, who I was and, what my capacity and capabilities were. And I found kind of like a nice intersection where I could, turn that into something useful to people and have a bit of a competitive advantage that made me stand out.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I sold that, I sold that company to focus on a technology called Ethereum. A lot of people have heard of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the largest cryptocurrency by market cap in the world, and Ethereum is the second largest by market cap. And so,
Mm-hmm.
without going too deep into Ethereum and blockchain, there's a lot of buzz and talk and media about it, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you have to go the other direction. necessarily, because it touches so many different things and there's so much stuff going on that you can't focus on the whole thing. So I think you can find niches in that one space you like, that even though there's a lot of activity and buzz, maybe there's areas that aren't getting as much attention where you can really be effective. And so Ethereum was where I spent the last 5 or 6 years focused on pretty heavily, and I still am today, and have some business interests that work in that. And then a year ago, I got really focused on commercial space, and space not real estate space, but like rockets and satellites and interstellar exploration, that kind of space. And so I've been learning a lot about that, and I've been investing in space companies and advising some founders of young space startups, because there's a whole new renaissance in space. We had Mercury and Apollo, and we landed on the moon, and then we had the space shuttle, and there's just kind of been stagnation for the last 40, 50 years since we visited the moon. And what we're seeing in recent times with SpaceX and reusable rockets are you've got the internet, and you've got startups, and you got this whole mentality of building businesses quickly. And now you've got the flexibility of taking something like space, where it was just this giant, decades-long waterfall model of huge government investment. Now you can do space stuff. You can start space companies out of your garage, and I think it's gonna take off. Literally, it's gonna go to the moon. And the way I felt about Ethereum 6 years ago is how I started feeling about commercial space and space startups a year ago.
So Alex, let me ask you this question for our listeners. So when you say commercial space, you're talking about projects that involve transporting people off the earth, or what? Tell us more about that.
Sure, yeah. So anything space related traditionally has been done, well, first just by governments, right? So you had, US, Russia, and certainly a number of other world governments, but you basically were a government if you're going to do anything in space. And you had these large government prime contractors like Lockheed Martin, I'm sorry, they were named something else back then, Boeing, but these really large government contractors that use like a cost plus model, right? They get a government contract, they charge a little bit on top of it, and it kind of incentivized them to develop new stuff, but draw out the timeline and the budget so they could maintain their operations, and in order to grow and do really important new things. But where we're at now is because of SpaceX changed the game when they and Blue Origin too. When you learn how to now, it's like if you flew on a plane, every time you get on a Boeing 747, space industry up until 5-6 years ago was like, we're going to build this plane, we're going to use it to fly somewhere, and then we're going to throw it away, and we're going to build another one to do it again every single time. It wasn't until recent history that now you don't have to do that, and that changes the economics and what's possible in space in amazing ways. And so you've got commercial companies, private companies, not just governments, but private companies that are able to come up with ideas, fail or succeed, and find clients. So you've got this whole economy building up these new use cases and products and services that it still depends on government funding. The government's certainly a big contributor to making space happen, but slowly but surely we're getting a larger commercial sector that's going to become more and more self-sufficient as time goes on.
What do you see happening, say, in the next 5 to 10 years with this business of commercial space? What are some of the possibilities that you see that are very realistic?
Well, a lot of people don't know this, but we're going back to the moon this year. People don't, the average person doesn't realize that we've got a number of companies. I think there's 8 companies that have contracts with NASA to do moon missions beginning this year and going through the end of the decade. Literally, Intuitive Machines is a company out of Houston that's been working for the last, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years on sending the first private company to send a lander to the moon, and they're scheduled to launch on a SpaceX rocket in June. We're going to have the first private company to send something to land on the moon ever in June. And
Wow.
this is the kind of thing that gets me excited, because
Mm.
no one's talking about that. I mean,
Yeah.
like, you go certain places there are, but the average person has no idea. That's just the start. I mean, there's a bunch more missions, a bunch more rockets, really cool stuff like that
Mhm.
is on the docket for the next 12 months. And so when you go out 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we got more satellites. We've got satellites going to the moon. We've got more missions to land on the moon. We've got the potential for SpaceX's Starship to change the entire economics of space again and actually go to Mars. This is real stuff. Like, we have the technology. It can happen.
Wow, that is fascinating. Well, Alex, we're gonna have to have you back on this program just to tell us more about what the future is what the future holds for us. But I want you to know that it's been a fascinating interview with you here today. If you had any last words of advice to people that were starting or running their business, what would you want to share with us?
Um, yeah, I guess, I mean, a lot of things I said earlier, that drive and passion, it's really important. I think, I, I guess the thought I would leave you with is there's all sorts of opportunities and things to do out there. If you look at that as one circle in a Venn diagram, all these things need to be done. Lots of
Mm,
opportunity out there. Then on the other side, there's you, and what are you passionate about? What interests you? What are the things that make you stand out that you can maybe do better than the rest? And then overlay those two into the Venn diagram and look right there in the center of things you're passionate about, or you can learn about, the needs that people have. And then don't try to solve all of them. You don't have to be great at all of it, but just focus in on that niche and really find that thing that you can focus on and do really well, and you know better than anyone else.
wow, excellent. Excellent way to put it. Well, listen, like I mentioned, I'd like to have you back on our program here in the future. If our listeners wanted to get a hold of you, if they had a question or something, what would be the best way to reach you?
Oh yeah, you can just email me. It's alexanderfisher@gmail.com. If you're part of the blockchain or Ethereum world, you'll find I go by the name alex.eth. My LinkedIn profile is alex.eth, so you probably won't find me if you type in Alex Fisher. Maybe you will, but those are a couple ways.
Well, we'll make sure we post that on the recording here where people can see that as well. All right, well, listen, thank you so much for being with us here today. Looking forward to having you back. And as always, there are more good days headed our way. We just got to do something to make them happen. Thank
Sounds
you,
great.
Alex.
Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.